Welcome to the 44th Toronto International Film Festival.
You lucky, lucky people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is our Toronto International Film Festival 2019 review of The Two Popes. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest film releases coming to a theater near you, except this week, where we are covering everything we saw during the tail end of the Toronto International Film Festival. Right now, we are talking about The Two Popes. This is a Netflix film that's coming soon, I think, so the trailer is definitely available, so you can check it out right now. So that is going to play right now, and then we're going to come back and give you guys a review.
Do you know the Beatles?
Yes, I know who they are.
Of course you do.
Eleanor Rigby.
Who?
Eleanor Rigby.
No, I don't know her.
You know, Yellow Submarine. Dum-dum-dum-dum.
Yellow Submarine. That's silly. It's very funny. You've been one of my harshest critics. The way you live is a criticism. Your shoes are a criticism.
You don't like my shoes?
Cuando tenga la tierra, sembraré las palabras
You think you know better?
que mi padre.
We are no longer part of this world.
You know the hardest thing is to listen. To hear his voice. God's voice.
Cuando tenga la tierra, te lo juro, semilla. Nuestro
It's not me who needs to be satisfied. It's 1.2 billion believers. Science!
You know there's a saying. God always corrects one pope by presenting the world with another pope. I should quite like to see my correction.
All right, so that was the trailer for The Two Popes. I don't know a lot about all the inner workings of the Roman Catholic Church, so I'm just going to give the most basic of introductions for this film. It's a conversation between Pope Benedict and who would later become Pope Francis, and it's them kind of spending time and having conversations together in between when they were each popes. How did I do, Stephen?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
What did you think of this film?
I thought this was a movie with two very good actors having interesting conversations, and I didn't get much more out of it than that. Which is not to say that I had a bad time. Like, I think Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce are fun to watch. And the conversations they have, when not being too overly heavy-handed on, like, this is a film about forgiveness, this is about progress versus conservatism, when it isn't like laying it on too thick, I think they're just charming to watch. Like, this is I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but this is like a nice old people movie where it's like two older people who know that like they have lived a long life, and like there's a lot of things about the modern world that they don't fully understand, and just watching them get up and dance or go for a walk or have a Fitbit type thing on is like comedy in and of itself. Like, it's just that kind of simple, easy movie with two charismatic leads. And unfortunately, other than that, I feel like there's not a whole lot to recommend this movie. I think it doesn't really know where it's going in terms of the conversation. Like, we all know what point A is. We all know what point B is. Like, we know there was a Benedict. Now there's a Francis. I have no idea how much of this conversation happened and how much is like purely imagined of like what would these popes have said to each other if they could talk right before that moment of change. But like, there's a ton of time spent doing flashback exposition of Pope Francis's life in Argentina. And I feel like that stuff is just very drawn out and like very, very, very heavy-handed and done late enough in the film that like we already kind of know most of it from earlier conversations. So there was something in the making of the movie that I feel like it doesn't move along very much, and it doesn't really have anything new to say. Like, even in its condemnation of Pope Benedict, it's kind of hitting him with kid gloves, right? Like there are scenes where he acknowledges some of the mistakes he's made, and he just asks for forgiveness, and then by the end of a conversation, we're meant to mostly forgive him and move on. I don't know. I feel like it's an easy film that doesn't do a whole lot, but the leads are charming enough that like I had a nice time watching it anyway.
Yeah, so I approached this film given that I'm not following these two popes normally, and I don't really know much about.
Oh man, Francis's Insta is off the hook, dude.
But yeah, like I don't really know much about their history or their sort of rivalry, I guess, or really anything about the two men at all. So I kind of approached this as just two men of faith talking with each other. And approach it the same way would I approach it if it was like a made-up religion in Westeros or something, right? Like I just wanted to watch these two characters play off each other, and I actually really liked it a lot.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of time spent on the backstory that is not the conversations that they're having. There is some really obnoxious scenes where they like talk about build bridges, not walls, which just felt. It just felt really like, is this the film we were making, or is this something you're like putting in for like Western audiences to like help drive home some message? Like that sort of stuff felt very strange to me. But the conversations where two men of faith with very specific beliefs about their faith and very strong both self-criticism and criticism of the other person dialogued back and forth about those things, and I thought they were moments of like greatness of them like acknowledging their flaws and kind of struggling over what they both want to do. Like, I mean, so I don't know how quote spoilery to be about different things, but just like the fact that both men want to walk away from what it is that they do, but they both believe that they need the other person to stay in their position to try to repair the damage that has been done to the church. I thought that those conflicts between their own ideals versus what they think the church as a people need were really, really compelling. And I found myself really drawn in to sort of their conversations and their sort of banter back and forth. They have amazing chemistry together. Like spoiler for the credits, like the credits is them sitting around watching a sporting game together, and I would have watched the entire game. Like if they would have just take the recording of the World Cup from 2014 or whatever it was and just shot them watching the entire game in character, I would watch that as a movie. I think yes, lesser actors maybe would have made me care less about it, but watching these two individuals have these conversations, I thought was really compelling, and I really enjoyed it.
So when, like, on paper, when you describe the kind of the battle of wills and philosophies, and like each is in a certain place and they're kind of in a gridlock because they both need to have this conversation and get a different outcome at the end, both of which are kind of, each of them wants to take an action that is the opposite of pushing for their philosophy, and so they're trying to talk each other into the opposite of what they believe. I think that construct is very clever, and I just didn't feel like the movie, I don't know if it was the pace of it or the writing or something. I didn't feel that tug of war as like deeply as I wanted to. I felt more like it was there. It was the text of the film sometimes, like they would basically acknowledge, this is what I want, this is what you want. But then it would kind of like ebb and flow in a way where it didn't feel like it was sliding in any direction. Like I didn't feel like either convinced each other of anything. I felt like the clock ran out, and that meant in the final stretch they had to come to an agreement. But I didn't feel the same, like them opening each other up to aspects of faith or to like shine light on their disagreements in any more meaningful way. I like what they paint about themselves, and you know, I'm kind of a sucker for films about faith, and I think like opening up and talking about, you know, should you be literally bound to the truth of Scripture as you know it, or should you try to be of the world and in society, and how much should you be vulnerable and presenting yourself as like a flawed person versus how much should you stand up as a rock because the church as an institution needs to thrive. That is all interesting, and it's there, and like my brain was having fun thinking about those things while the movie was going on. I just feel like it's painting in a very simple brush where, like, Benedict was pretty much the bad pope that we forgive, and Francis is the perfect pope whose only flaw is that he's guilty about some things many decades ago that even then it's not clear whether or not it would have been a better or worse choice to act differently.
Yeah.
Like, and when it does the, like, make bridges not walls type messaging, that seems to be, like, extra piling it on thick, that, like, Francis is the cool pope, he's the liberal pope, he's, like, the progressive pope. And
well, I was really glad that wasn't the end of the film, because it goes into this music montage of, like, all these walls around the world, and, like, people literally spray painting build bridges not walls and all this kind of stuff, and I was just like, oh, this movie just now lost me.
Yeah.
Like, you were doing so good. I was totally on board. And then this game. And then there's a whole rest section of the movie. And I was like, oh, all right, cool.
Right. Yeah, and that definitely helps. Because I just think I also don't follow the papacy too heavily. Like, I'm not an avid watcher of that or soccer. But I know enough to know that, like, while Francis has been a step in the right direction, it isn't like the Catholic Church is now this beacon for progressive ideals that everyone can latch onto. Like, there are plenty of things where it is still kind of progressive, and there have still been, you know, issues of child abuse somewhat swept under the rug by Catholicism. And I think, like, painting it so binary, like, it was bad, now it's good, look at this saintly person and look at this other person who realized that their time is gone. It just felt like the movie could do something more interesting if they both had more real flaws they were willing to bring to the table in their conversations. So
I think at least that Francis isn't painted as the perfect savior. The thing that they keep beating over the whatever, like the thing they keep hitting on with him is his work towards inequality. They focus less on him trying to correct the problems with the Catholic Church. So at least it's not like the Benedict was super bad, Francis came in and fixed everything. It's he focuses on the one thing, and in the periphery is this, like, child abuse and stuff like that portion. So it's at least not trying to make it like two sides of one coin of, like, oh, and now aren't we all happy that everything worked out? It's really just kind of like these two characters dealing with this transition between them. And I think that the reason why it's okay that they're not changing each other's minds is that they do go through their own transitions themselves. So it's not about them teaching the other person, it's about them teaching themselves. And then I think that even though it's not like a Succession thing where you're watching these two, like, powerhouses just, like, be monstrous to each other. It's the scenario itself is funny because Francis wants to retire and Benedict has to approve that retiring, but he won't, right? And there's nothing that Francis can do to make Benedict sign the thing and say, yes, you are released. So there's not I'm trying to change your mind to let me go. It's them having these conversations, knowing full well that they're at an impasse.
Yeah, like they're stuck circumventing the issue because Anthony Hopkins will literally just ignore the question if it's asked of him.
Yeah, and, like, there is a funniness and, like, a levity to that I just was, like, totally eating up. Like, it was like I was not for a moment bored during this film. I was totally, like,
I wasn't bored either, and that's why I'm kind of surprising myself by, like, being the devil's advocate here, because it was a totally nice way to have, like, a early morning showing. Especially, it felt like the kind of light movie that you need at that time of day. When I think back on it, I feel like there's so much more it could have done, and I don't know. It's just it's coasting to me so much on the charisma of its leads.
Yeah, and I totally concede that. Like, I guarantee you, if other people were in this role, if either one of the two leads were absent from this film, it would be a different thing, and I don't know that I would enjoy it as much.
I do have to say, I think the casting is pretty genius, though. Like, especially, like, Anthony Hopkins does not look like Pope Benedict at all, but when you see him do that, like make that face and act the way he's acting. Like I can't imagine another actor in his role. And Jonathan Pryce, to me, is like the spitting image of Pope Francis now. Like I honestly felt confused which was which when it was showing news footage. Like at that end, I didn't know, like, are they showing me the real footage of Francis, or are they showing me like footage of Jonathan Pryce that's meant to look like Pope Francis?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad the High Sparrow's back.
Yeah. So, should we get to verdicts?
Sure.
All right, Steven, if you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a wait for rental. I think it was a perfectly nice way to spend 2 hours, but I do think it's a fairly inconsequential movie, and I do think it's a subject matter that you could, especially with these two actors, you could have had them really sink their teeth into something that was, it could have still had levity, but just it could have probed at things that made me think about my own life like more. And I feel like this isn't finding anything that you didn't already know at the beginning. Like this is trying to show a nice journey, but I don't think it's revealing anything that the audience didn't feel walking in. And to me, that's kind of a missed opportunity. And it is rare to have a very philosophic religious movie that is just like a two-hander of like a deep conversation. So to me, that kind of is dropping the ball.
All right. I'm going to give it a recommend with a caveat. As I said, I really, really enjoyed it. I don't know that everybody is going to enjoy it. There are definitely a lot of people in our screening that did not enjoy it. But what I will say is that this is of the festival, this is our only 9 a.m. screening. And I know 9 a.m. doesn't sound like that early, but when you're going to sleep at like 3.
Yeah, and we're on West Coast time.
Yeah, and we're on West Coast time. A 9 a.m. screening is a little rough. So we were potentially going to abandon this one to go sleep in, basically, or record some more episodes. But we said, nah, screw it, we're going to do this. And I'm really glad that we did, because I enjoyed it.
And I am too, which is why this rating system is hard to follow, because it's rental, even leaning toward pass with a caveat, but I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, and you will only be able to rent this.
Yep.
Because it's going to Netflix. So everything is just all screwed up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is a review of The Two Popes. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can go to twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. We are going to go take off, and we have a few more episodes to record. We got to get dinner, and then we're going to go see Knives Out. So we're excited over here, but we got to go. So see you next time. Bye.
This is Canadian content, and it's time we take credit for it. Starting now.